Welcome back to Jeremy Irons. We're going to start out with a few questions about race. And the obvious first one for me is how you got involved in this project. Was the script sent to you? Was it that you found Stephen Hopkins to be a particularly fine director? Was it the idea of playing Avery Brundage?
Well, it's always a mixture of many things. You know, you want to go to work. I read the script and I thought it's a great story. I met Stephen over a coffee downtown here and liked him. I didn't know much about his work, but I liked him, and he came recommended. Brundage, queer fish. I thought I'd like to find out why he did what he did in his career, and I just wanted to be part of making the movie, and that was 3 years, I think, before we started, because the movie it couldn't get financed in America. It got financed in Europe. They didn't want to make it here, so yeah. You know, it's strange. What makes you choose to tell a particular, be part of it, the telling of a particular story? And the personalities have a lot to do with it. Stephen, I liked. And you never know how a movie's going to turn out. You can strike lucky or not strike lucky. But finally you go with your gut. And it was it was wonderful going to Berlin and shooting that stuff, seeing the actual locations, that stadium, which is extraordinary, which you don't quite gather there, but it's, from the outside you might notice it's not as high as it is deep. And indeed they dug it out. So you go in at one level and then it's down there. It's the most extraordinary piece of work.
And that stadium was built specifically for the Berlin Olympics.
For the film. No.
No, I mean for the 36 Olympics.
Yeah, it was.
And that is where you did shoot some
That's where we
scenes.
shot, yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Tell me, did you know much about Avery Brundage before filming? What kind of research did you do?
I mentioned to a friend of mine, David Putnam, who was my neighbor in Ireland, and I said, I'm going to do this film with Stephen Hopkins about the 36 Olympics. He said, what are you playing? I said, I'm playing Avery Brundage. He said, it was a complete and utter, and I won't mention the word. And indeed, that's how he's remembered. I don't think he comes across enough as one in the movie. Although, you know, what makes a man's reputation? I don't know. It's what he does. I mean, what they don't mention there was that he was the guy who, after the Munich Olympics, the massacre there of the Israelis, he said, we've got to go on with the games must go on. And a terrible disaster there that was, I think he made the right decision, because I think we can't bow to terrorists on any level and allow them to disturb our way of life. If we do, they've won.
And were you thinking about that aspect of Brundage's real history, which is not at all in the film, in creating the character that you play here? In other words, how much of that sense of what he became? Because after all, when he chose to remove the Jewish athletes, in other words, when he was pushed to do so by the Nazis and fulfilled that part of the bargain, I gather that his reputation in the United States suffered.
Completely, absolutely. I think he was voted out of his position when he came back, and he regained it some years later, I think in the 50s. We don't know exactly what happened in that room with the Nazis. We don't know whether he was tacitly blackmailed like we show in the movie. because that embassy in Washington was never built. But I think an enormous amount of pressure must have been put upon him to make him do that. And history will never tell. He never told, as far as my research showed. I can't say he'd do it as a favor to the Nazis. Very interesting, in the blurb at the end of the movie, it said, you know, he collaborated with them. I don't think that's what I would call collaboration. He was a very pragmatic man, fought that the Americans go to the Olympics because he didn't believe in boycott. He believed that sport should be something which glues the world together, that highlights particular behavior, but that rises above it. So I personally think his decision was best. It's interesting that the Africans recently, playing in I can't remember which African team it was, but playing in Moscow, were having terrible problems with the Moscow spectators being very, very rude in their behavior to the African players, you know, throwing bananas and standing up and making ape noises. And they decided that they would go back and play again in the World Cup so that the world could see how this behavior, rather than being frightened away by it. And I think that was the right decision. And I sort of applaud Brundage, although a lot of his decisions were criticized. You know, he was a huge believer in amateurism in sport. Didn't like professionalism at all. And yet, when he was taking a team of sportsmen to another city, he would take a fee for doing so. He wouldn't pass it on to because they weren't allowed to take money. If they took money, they were professional. I suppose he would justify it by saying that he, you know, had expenses. But he was criticized on many levels.
Well, when we first meet your Brundage in the film, I was struck by a certain rigidity of body and expression. It's even the way that the collar with the tight pin holding it, and the mustache, the clipped way of speaking, tight chin. How important was costume design and just that sense of a physical carriage of this this millionaire? You know, he was a powerful man who was in construction, right?
Yeah.
How did that all come together?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how that happened. I just wanted to play him. I wanted to make him as powerful as I could. He was a bull of a man. And so he, you know, suits were power suits, and I don't know whether it works. I looked at it tonight. I hadn't seen it before tonight. And he's got a certain sort of bullish quality. I don't know. You just try to find the heart of a character. You try to find his motor. And I knew he'd been, I mean, I think he was from Ohio originally, but his construction business was in Chicago, and he built sort of massive skyscrapers and whatever, all as big as they were in the 30s and 20s. So I knew he was a man who was used to working with the unions and working with the mafia and working with the city councils and financiers. And I knew he was a man used to not being bullied, but who would make sure he got his way. So I think we just tried to encapsulate that a little bit in how he dressed and how he moved.
Even, I love the introductory scene where it's William Hurt and you who are verbally sparring off. And he, you know, without his jacket, we see his shirt sleeves. And there's a softness in his appeal to conscience. And there's that toughness in Brundage. You know, two of the actors who have sustained careers for quite a few decades now. And I don't know if you found working with William Hurt in that introductory scene particularly exciting.
I found working with William Hurt in all the scenes particularly exciting. I think he's a wonderful actor. He's an actor I learned from the whole time. He's very different to me, but I've always admired him, and to get the chance to play opposite him and watch his decisions and choices and the way he really sort of goes deep. I love that. It was great to have that argument of semantics, and in the next scene where we.
As well.
So it was one of the greatest pleasures for me of making this film to work with Bill.
Were competitive sports important to you in growing up?
Well, I did them. Because, at school you do that, don't you? So I was very good. I was a very good 100-yard sprinter. And I was very good at long-distance running. And both have stood me in very good stead, because there are times in life where you need to do a bit of a sprint. And there are times in life, especially in my career, where you have to have the mindset to keep on going and hopefully get there first. So both are important. But rugby football was my game. Is that competitive or not? I suppose it is, yeah. And I did that until I came to leave school, and then I stopped competing in sport. I ride horses, but not competing. I sail once a year. We have a competition with the sailing, and we have a lot of fun. But it's not really what you would call serious competition. I use sport to relax. I'm in a fairly competitive business, and so my leisure activities, I like to be quite different.
Sure. And have you ever watched Leni Riefenstahl's film, The Olympiad, which we see in this movie?
Not recently. And I should have seen it really recently, but I saw it, I suppose 20 years ago. I'm blown away by it. I thought she gives a wonderful performance, Carice.
Yeah, Carice van Houten, who plays Leni Riefenstahl.
Who you've seen most of, I think, in Game of Thrones. Those people who watch Game of Thrones, I think you see almost all of Carice in that.
I had first seen her, she's Dutch, if I remember correctly, in The Black Book, a film by Paul Verhoeven, where she was quite wonderful.
Yeah.
And here, it's intriguing, because we get to see various levels throughout the film of manipulation and competition. Obviously, the most important is that of Jesse Owens in becoming the best, the fastest, coached by Larry Snyder. But the tensions that the film delineates between you and Mahoney, the William Hurt character, between Leni Riefenstahl and Goebbels is also interesting, because, as he says, these games are mine, which was true because the German ministry was financing Leni Riefenstahl's filmmaking. But when she says, yes, but the film is mine, and without it, it'll be forgotten, he has to cede. So throughout the film, there are layers of competition and manipulation. And I think, maybe you'll agree, maybe not, that one of the key scenes which you are in is the early one of introduction with Leni Riefenstahl and Goebbels, where she asks, do you want me to translate or interpret?
Yeah.
Because it's clear that much of what's being said in German is being softened for the sake of your character. So I don't know, was there more work for those layered scenes, or?
I don't know. No, because we believe anyway that Goebbels spoke English, so it was all a bit of a.
Yes.
It was all a bit of a, business.
Yeah. And I kept getting the feeling that, as played by this actor, Goebbels understood with his eyes everything that was being said in English, but his position of manipulation was stronger if he didn't show that and allowed others to do it for him. The Olympiad.
My wife uses that with deafness.
A tiny detail that I came across recently, that Jesse Owens was apparently the first African American ever to appear on television in the United States, because there was some experimental footage that aired of him in 1936. So there's a kind of other historical layer of how important it is not only to achieve something in sport or history, but to have it recorded and to have it disseminated. And that's, I think, one of the things that's going on in the film. I, about 10 days ago, met Jason Sudeikis at a party, who plays Coach Snyder. And I think he does a remarkable job here, because I know him primarily from Saturday Night Live and didn't know he was capable of this kind of sustained performance. And I hope you don't mind, or I hope he doesn't mind someday to hear about this, conveying what he said to me, that he was in absolute awe of you. And I noticed at this party, by the way, has this habit of snapping photographs all the time. He's a real amateur photographer. And he actually told me that there was a moment where he was photographing you during a rehearsal, and you weren't too pleased about it, and you said, "We have so little rehearsal time, we really need to use it just for that." This leads to my question about rehearsal, whether you indeed feel that for film, as opposed to theater, which you also do, do you prefer a longer rehearsal period where, in fact, the actors work in the space, or is that something that just isn't the luxury in a film like this?
Very rarely a luxury. I mean, it is a luxury, and it's very rare. So we perhaps have the chance to actually do the scene once, which is why when I saw Jason taking, I said, "Come on, man, come on. Let's get to work here," because there isn't much time. But I don't remember the last film where we spent a week rehearsing. I think it was about 35 years ago when I made Betrayal.
Ooh.
No, you have to try and be ready and have it thought through well in advance. You don't have the luxury that you do in the theatre of experimenting and playing around. There's just not the time.
Okay. To go back to Avery Brundage, because obviously the film is set in 1936, before the extent of the Nazi persecution of the Jews became manifest. Does that help to rationalize why Brundage, in your opinion, would have gone along with the idea of removing Glickman and Stoller, the Jewish athletes? In other words, did you think about that sort of motivation in the scene where obviously your character is forced to take an action that goes against what he would believe?
I don't know why. In truth, I don't know why he did it. But I did think it was incredibly important when we talked about this, Stephen and I, before we shot. I said, we have to make this with the perspective of its time. Aryan supremacy was being discussed by philosophers in this country, Scandinavia, Germany. If you look back, you'll find all the information, all the scientific studies. People were really interested about this, about keeping the human race pure, whatever that meant. And I think it's only when we saw the logical conclusion of that by the Nazis' behavior that everyone went, no, we can't think in those terms at all. But at the time, I'm not saying the guy in the street, but philosophers and writers, one can look back and find it. So I think it's very important to see the story from its standpoint, to see that those people were making the decisions from what they knew then.
Right.
And time hasn't really changed. I mean, you know what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Chechnya, what's going on in Afghanistan, what's going on in Africa. We don't do very much about it. You know, genocides are continuing. We can't do anything about it. The newspapers don't tell us because there are other things like the Super Bowl and Trump. So I think it would be easy for generations in sort of 40 years' time to look back and say, look at them, you know, what they were interested in when such and such was going on. And they'll say, and they knew, and they did nothing about it. And in the way that we look back now. So I don't think things change, sadly.
I mean, in a certain sense, how do I put this? Probably at the time for Brundage, because putting Jesse Owens in the place of one of the Jewish athletes did lead to an Olympic medal, the judgment would not have been quite as harsh, because after all, America won. But it proved to
And he put two Africans in instead of two Jews, I mean, which the Nazis hated.
Yeah. And one could say that only in something like the Olympics then, and perhaps it continues today with the marathons, it provides a level playing field, literally and figuratively, for people from various cultures, nations, faiths, to compete and disprove the notion that any one group has the supremacy or the power, the whatever. I mean, I'm guessing that that's what was animating Brundage if we look at him from the most positive possible perspective. And I know that both sports and politics are public activities, but they necessitate behind-the-scenes negotiations, and that's what the film makes quite manifest, that whatever we think we know about the public displays, we don't know that, for example, Brundage saw the swastikas on his first trip, demanded that they be removed. They were removed by the second trip. However, the roundup of Jews that he saw, which he didn't see the second time, yeah, it's still there. It's just at night, and it's Larry Snyder who sees it rather than Brundage. So nothing changes. It's just a question of how much is made visible. And I don't know to what extent for you, even if I compare this to some of your wonderful work in films like Margin Call or Reversal of Fortune, is it harder for you or more delightful to play a character that isn't really all that sympathetic for the viewer?
I'm never really worried about sympathy. I want to play characters who teach us something about ourselves and about life and about the nature of people and the true nature of life. I've never seen people as black or white. I've always seen them as grey. We're very, very complicated. We've all got good and evil in us. And every day we make little choices about how much of each we use. And that's what religions, I think, try to encourage us to use, the good. So when I come to play a character, I don't think about sympathetic. Of course, I'm sympathetic with him, but I don't want the audience necessarily to be sympathetic. I want them to be touched, be interested, maybe be amused or be intrigued. It also gives me a more interesting time as an actor because you're exploring complicated people, which we are. And that sort of writing in movies is quite rare, actually. I mean, movies, you know, they tend to be more two-dimensional than real life. Writers, only the great writers, embrace the inconsistency of man. Shakespeare being one of them. But most script writers, I would say, don't. And it's the inconsistency of behavior in people, which we all have. I mean, we're all inconsistent. We behave one way to our wives, one way to our employers, one way to taxi driver who can't understand us. You know, we're all complicated and odd and difficult, and that's what I love. If I can find a character like that, that interests me, and I hope that something in the complication is recognized by the viewer, and he thinks, oh yeah, I'm a bit like that, or I understand that, or I don't want them to sit there thinking, oh no, he's gorgeous. You know, that's not enough.
And tell me, because you've been working with some of the world's great directors in the recent past, in addition to Stephen Hopkins, and I'm curious how working with him might be comparable to this. I know that you've worked with Tornatore recently, who directed Cinema Paradiso, Billy August with Night Train to Lisbon, as well as earlier House of the Spirits. You worked with Bertolucci and Cronenberg and David Lynch and Istvan Sabo. Is there something about, for example, Hopkins' work with you in this film that is distinct from the others, or is there a particular relationship with a filmmaker that you find to be most vital in allowing you to do your best work?
The relationship I look for is the relationship of a mate, a friend, somebody to bounce off, throw ideas at, suggest. That's what I look for. And you don't always find that. I mean, some directors are great at visuals and are only really interested about what the camera's doing and how it's going to look, and don't really comprehend acting. They don't know what it is. They hire the actors who bring the budget, and then once they've done that, they'll try and get the ones they are told by their casting agency are good. But they don't really know. I mean, I only had one director, John, lovely man, directed Die Hard, I did.
Tiernan.
John McTiernan.
Yeah, McTiernan.
And he never really said anything to me. I mean, we chatted a lot, but he came to me, I don't know, halfway through the movie, and I was doing a scene. He said, listen, I don't want to, I don't really know about what you do. But I'm just a little worried. Will the audience understand your accent at that point? And I said, oh, I don't know. Do you think not? Do you think it's too strong? I'll water it down. He said, thanks very much. He said, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You're doing great. It's wonderful. So there are some directors like that. But I love the ones like Cronenberg, where you think you're both in it together. And I remember he said to me once, he said, I can't wait for this film to come out so the critics will tell us what it's about. And that sort of non-egotistical attitude I find very attractive.
To go from a kind of sublime to what might be ridiculous, but perhaps not, what can you tell us about Batman versus Superman and playing Alfred in what is about to be a major super production? Late March, Warner Brothers is releasing this film, and maybe there's not all that much you can tell us, but I'm curious to what extent that is a different kind of experience from the ones you've been describing just now.
Well, it's true, I can say very little, or I will have to shoot you all. But I've seen it. It's an extraordinary film. It's wonderful. I think everyone's going to adore it. I play a relatively small part. There are an awful lot of good actors in it. I mean, it's Batman against Superman, but there's other people too, other heroes and whatever. There's an awful lot of us. So I sort of drift on and off every now and again and play Ben's Batman. I mean, Batman to Batman. Do you know what a Batman is? He's a sort of PA. That's what we call, in the army, you have a Batman. Do you know that? No, you don't know that. Not in the American army. In the British army, you have a Batman, and he's your butler, really. So I'm Batman's Batman. I shall work on that, probably not again in this country, that particular joke. But it was great working with Ben, who is an extraordinary actor. We've, I think, created a different sort of Alfred to the ones seen before. Zack Snyder, I think, has created a different sort of film to the ones we've seen before. More than that, I cannot say, except that I wear glasses in it.
We'll wait 2 more months, that's all right.
Yeah.
Now, in the interim, I gather that your next work, you are going to do theatre in England, Long Day's Journey into Night at the Bristol Old Vic.
I am.
And if that is correct, that's your former theatre school, right?
Well, the theatre school is where I went to theatre school, yes, but there's a company also, the Bristol Old Vic Company, which is where I continued on from my training. I went and worked there for 3 years when I was in my early 20s. And it's a beautiful little theatre. It's celebrating its 250th anniversary as a theatre this year. It's the oldest theatre in England. It's the most wonderful auditorium. And as I say, yes, it's where I started. It's also where our director, Richard Eyre, decided he wanted to. He used to run the National Theatre in London, and he decided he wanted to be in the theatre, wanted to be a director. He watched Peter O'Toole doing something at Bristol, and he fell in love with the profession. And so we're both going back there to celebrate this anniversary of 250 years with one of possibly your greatest play, Long Day's Journey into Night. Which I'm absolutely terrified about. I saw Laurence Olivier do it when I was 22, I think, and he was very good. And so I'm going to go and do that, old Tyrone. And those of you who have got some air miles, come over to Bristol and watch our attempt.
When will this take place?
I think we open on the 23rd of April, I think. Yes, 23rd of April. We only play for about 5 weeks. So get your skates on if you're coming. Well, I'm looking forward to it with sort of trepidation. A lot of words, and the older you get, the harder it is to remember them.
We are going to take a few questions from the audience, but I feel the obligation to ask you one question. When you were last on this stage, we had just shown Trashed, a documentary that showed us your deep passion for somehow addressing the way that pollution of our planet has been taking place at an accelerating rate, and how desperately we all need to do something about the way that garbage has been seeping into the waters and everywhere, earth, air, and water. Has the situation since 2012 improved in any way? In other words, whether it's a thing that more cities have become like San Francisco in the effort to reduce things, or as far as you can tell, has it gotten worse or stayed the same?
I think it's probably getting worse because Asia is getting sort of completely snowed under with plastic. As far as one can see, the sea quality is getting worse. I mean, the problem is it's like turning a supertanker. It takes a while. I think it takes a tanker 12 miles or something to stop. So this is going to take a while. But I think what is happening is it's getting higher up the agenda in some places. I don't think anywhere is doing what San Francisco is doing. I think they're doing a little better than they were when we made the show. I think they've improved their figures by about 5%. But I did see, as I walked yesterday in the Upper West Side, I saw all the recyclable bags there, and I thought, oh, that's good. That's an awful lot of it, but nevertheless, that's good that that's separate. And Bloomberg, I don't know if it was before we showed it here, but we showed it at the New York Times too, and he said, all right, now all plastics can be recycled, which is good, because they can be. So slowly, perhaps catchy monkey. I mean, I think we've got to get a move on. You see it with global warming. Everybody's still people saying, oh, no, it's just a weather blip. what we're getting. It takes time. It takes time to shift consciousness. What can you do? You can just do your own little bit.
Yeah,
Make sure that you recycle.
I said it a few years ago. I still do this. I'm reusing. If I get a plastic bag, I keep using that plastic bag till it absolutely dies.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to, if ever I have a plastic bottle, just keep reusing it until it can no longer be used and not take a new one.
It's very satisfying, isn't it?
Well, I don't really want to wear out my hand patting myself on the back, but if everybody did just a little bit, then I think it would perhaps make a difference. But let me go back to race as opposed to bringing in too much of our garbage mentality. We have time for a few questions. If we could raise the lights just a little bit, I see a hand right in the middle there.
Oh,
and
you're still here.
Repeat, yes. We have just a few minutes, but go right ahead.
My question is twofold. If you could go back in time, what actor or actress would you work with?
If you could go back in time, which actor or actress would you most want to work with?
That's correct. And secondly, what young actor is doing it right and who's going to have a great career in your thoughts?
And in your opinion, which young actor is these days doing it right? And
well, I never worked with Peter at all, but he was the guy who made me want to be an actor. I did work with Laurence Olivier. We had an actor in England called Ralph Richardson, who I loved, and I would have loved to have spent time working deeply with him. And then, of course, there's Olivia de Havilland. Actors today, I think Eddie Redmayne did an extraordinary job in The Danish Girl. I thought Tom Hooper as a director did too. I mean, it's a really difficult, complicated subject, and I thought they were so delicate the way they handled it. So I think Eddie will probably go on and do good work, hopefully.
yeah, Eddie Redmayne was a guest here last year with The Theory of Everything.
Right, yeah.
And he's obviously working from strength to strength all the time.
Yeah. A couple of great parts, right? You need the parts. There's a lot of good actors out there who haven't got the parts. Look at Bryan Cranston, for instance, beginning to get the parts now. Always been a great actor.
That's right. And not just Trumbo, he's just finished, I think, doing for HBO All the Way, the film version of the play that he did on Broadway playing Lyndon Johnson. So that ought to be exciting too. There was a hand that I thought I saw right here. Yes, Dr. Ruth.
Dr. Ruth, oh my God. She's gonna... Just don't talk to me about sex, all right?
Coming out of Nazi Germany, I have a serious question.
Did Germany try to suppress the film? Is the film going to Germany?
Oh, I'm sure it's going to Germany.
Is the film being shown? Is the film Race being shown in Germany? Has the country had any problem in showing this?
No.
Will you go for a discussion to Germany with young
I won't, because I'm going to be doing my play when it comes out.
The question was, would you go to Germany to have a discussion with young people about this?
And I have to tell you, thank God that in that film it doesn't have much sex.
Thank God that in this film there isn't too much sex.
There was a huge sex scene between Brundage and Leni that we cut out. With a lot of cameras involved.
Is there, yes, one gentleman in the back.
Why couldn't you get this film financed in the United States?
Why wasn't there financing for this film in the United States?
You ask me. I don't know. I wasn't involved in that because I'm just an actor who was employed in it. But it's interesting, isn't it, actually? Interesting.
I mean, I guess that some of us might be tempted to assume that the portrait has a problematic aspect in terms of how you see the racism that Jesse Owens experienced in this country the irony that the first time he and the other black athletes did not have to be segregated, did not have to be in different quarters, was in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
So there is an element in the film that is perhaps discomforting in terms of American history, but I still have trouble believing that financiers, would do that kind of censorship in terms of
I mean,
history.
maybe it was something as simple as the fact that there's been a very good documentary on Jesse Owens and a very good documentary on Leni Riefenstahl. So maybe,
That is true too.
Maybe they felt the horse had bolted.
And also, I confess that I mispronounced the actor's name in introducing Stephan James. While I think he does such a fine job in this film, he is not a well-known name. If this were Chris Rock or something, the film would have immediate financing. But the problem is that when you have actors playing lead roles who are not known, it's that much harder to ensure the financing. There's a gentleman on the aisle. Yes.
First, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience watching this movie.
Thank you.
Growing up, the extent of my knowledge of Jesse Owens, I've never done any reading on sports enthusiasts, but he won 4 gold medals, and that was great. He put it to Hitler. But watching this, there was so much more to it. As you say, the irony, what he had to encounter growing up. It was so informative and so inspiring that I just applaud you. I think of all the movies I've seen here, I've enjoyed this the most. It really captured me.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
At the end, there was a scene in a hotel where they were honoring Jesse Owens, and they wouldn't let him in. Was that supposed to be in New York?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, under what premise was he not allowed in the front? I don't understand.
Because he was black.
This is a question that relates to the last scene because it's not in the South. It's New York, and right after he won the medals, and the dreadful irony that he has to use the servants' entrance because there were codes in place in New York in the 30s. There were codes still in place in the 50s that discriminated and that did not provide, it wasn't the South, there wasn't the same kind of segregation. It was more genteel. It was in the high-class establishments where the assumption was that if you were black, you were supposed to be going to the servants' entrance. It's a horrific indictment, even though it's presented, I think, quite subtly at the very end of the film. That should be the last scene is also kind of interesting in terms of the screenplay and direction.
We've just built 2 big high-rise blocks in London. England is sort of suffering, or the whole world is suffering by the very rich and getting richer and the poor getting poorer. Just built 2 wonderful blocks. And the council has insisted that it not just be bought by very wealthy people, the apartments, but that there should be some social housing too. The people who live in the social housing have their own entrance and are not allowed in the main foyer. They go around to another entrance. So we are creating the sort of, it's not racial, but financial difference between the rich and the poor in this instance. And that's in London in 2012. So are we really?
I think you're hearing a murmur of, yeah, we know about that, because it's happening in this country as well. We want to believe that we live in a time where the kinds of levels of discrimination seen in this film don't exist, but we would be deluding ourselves if we assume that all is well. It is a constant struggle. It is a constant need for vigilance and positive action. And I think films like this do serve to remind us that behind all of these celebratory things, hey, Olympics, winning medals, there are layers of experience that need to be unpacked, and we need to see the mirrors that are not very comfortable too. I realize that it is kind of late, and we just want to express our great appreciation. Focus Features, by the way, February 9th release. The film is being released. Tell your friends that it'll be in theaters within about 10 days. But until then, Jeremy Irons, thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us.
Pleasure.